Hello and welcome to the latest webinar from the US-Qatar Business Council. My name is Stephen Cole and I'll be your host for today's discussion called How Will LNG Drive a Sustainable Energy World? Qatar and the United States have shared a deep and a long-lasting history and partnership in the oil and gas sector. This partnership, among others, has resulted in Qatar becoming the top LNG exporter in the world. Today, oil and gas exporters are facing ever-increasing scrutiny, though, on how their operations are contributing to the world's environmental challenges that we hear so much about, and are being urged to enhance their sustainability practices. This discussion among leading energy experts will focus on how LNG will function as an important bridge fuel to clean energy. What steps are being taken to enhance sustainability among the oil and gas industry, and what actions Qatar is taking to be a responsible LNG producer. And to talk about all of this, I'm joined by an expert panel. I am delighted to introduce His Excellency Abdullah bin Hamad Al-Attiyah, Chairman of the Abdullah bin Hamad Al-Attiyah International Foundation for Energy and Sustainable Development. And of course, he is former Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Energy and Industry of Qatar. Joining His Excellency is Marianne, who is an Adjunct Senior Research Scholar and Advisory Board Member of the Center on Global Energy Policy from the School of International and Public Affairs at Columbia University. We're also thrilled to present Dominic Giannetti, the President of ExxonMobil Qatar, and Mohammed Barakat, the Managing Director of the US-Qatar Business Council. And before we delve into all the topics at hand, I'd like to invite Mohammed to say a few words on behalf of the US-Qatar Business Council. Mohammed, over to you.
Thank you, Stephen, for this kind introduction. I would like to welcome His Excellency Abdullah bin Hamad Al-Attiyah and thank His Excellency for taking the time to discuss a very important topic in today's world. The Council is always appreciative for hosting His Excellency and his deep knowledge and experience that he always shared with us to different topics, specifically when it comes to the oil and gas sector. I would like also to thank Stephen Cole for moderating this. Stephen, thank you for moderating this with us, and our panelists, Marianne and Dominic Giannetti, for their participation and taking the time. Qatar and the US have a very long-lasting relationship in the oil and gas sector and have been strong partners in Qatar's LNG development. From the beginning of the discoveries of the LNG, the American companies were the first investors to take the opportunity and at that time, the risk to go in Qatar and develop that industry, and no more than His Excellency knows about that during that time. The council was established in 1996, and the reason the council was at some point established was the beginning of that relationship, the oil and gas. Most of our founding partners were the oil and gas companies, the biggest oil and gas companies, American oil and gas companies that founded the council as a place to discuss and have the opportunities to present. So in 25 years since USQBC was established, we have expanded beyond, of course, the oil and gas, and as much as Qatar have diversified out of the oil and gas industry, we have as well covered many other industries. Qatar has become very big in many other industries, the sport industry as well, infrastructure, and so on. So we're always proud to support this US-Qatar bilateral relationship and the business relationship. And as much the economy grow in Qatar, we hope Americans will as well take advantage of this and take it to the next level. With that, I really thank everyone again, and I'll turn it back to you, Stephen, to begin this discussion.
Thanks very much, Mohammed. And you mentioned sport in Qatar, and of course, everybody looking forward to the World Cup in Qatar. So let's start the discussion. Your Excellency, can we begin with you? We've seen that natural gas prices have been consistently high in all regions for the past few months, especially though in Asia, Europe, and North America. Some of these prices are the highest season prices on record. Why do you think that is? What are the reasons behind this price rally? And do you think it'll last?
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me to be participate in this conference. If you see the history of gas, or even with oil and gas and other energies, it's really never it's a go up and down, and this is the history. This is we accept it because it's the demand and supply. The demand and supply, is the main factor. You can't see how the price of take a gas for instance, is what the demand for gas or even the supply. If there is oversupply, economic recession, you will see the gas going down. When you see there are big demand, and so you see the gas in this why we are seeing very very high price in Asia and even in Europe too. It's because of the COVID-19. COVID-19 for the last 2 years or 1.5 years, forced many industrial countries and many countries to reduce their industrial, their power, their close many, business sectors. So the demand, especially China and India, who are today are the main factor for the demand and supply today. When they relax, when they do not buy or go to the market, you can see that there will be drop very dramatically. You remember a few years ago the gas reached very low even before COVID. I remember the LNG reached $4, $5. It was very low. That faced for the high cost producers, as in Australia and other parts of the world, very difficult to continue, to produce. And even some of them, they cannot close it, but they make a lot of loss because they have to sell and they're under cost. So this is why after now, the vaccine, and after it takes a long time, people start demonstrated very strongly because there are millions of people lost their job, and this is it was a big factor for social social contact, or what they would do. They lost their job. There is no support from the governments cannot support to support them for a long period. So many people, if you can see in USA and Europe, they force the government and the politician to open, because there is no way just to wait, and they are starving. They lost their mortgage, they will be homeless, they will this is it. It will be very difficult for the whole world, especially the industrial countries, to manage of it.
I so agree. That is the Qatar perspective, and can I just for a second get a US perspective from Marianne Carr. Marianne, do you believe prices will continue to rally?
Well, I think that prices could soften somewhat over the next year as economic growth slows a bit because of the Delta variant of COVID. And then you're going to have nuclear power plant startups in Japan and South Korea. But I believe they're going to remain elevated until there's a new wave of liquefaction plants starting up in about 2024 and 2025. And that will return prices to more normal levels. However, they could remain elevated if we don't get all these supplies that we're expecting. And I think the ones probably most at risk could be the US and Mozambique. In the US, it would be policy driven probably. So if they don't come online on time, you would actually see a longer period of elevated prices. But I would agree with His Excellency that it's really the recovery in the world economy that has driven these prices, particularly in Asia, particularly in China, the first half of 2021. We also, on top of that, had an exceptionally cold winter. and now have the hottest July on record in 2021, all of which helps the demand for gas. So,
Okay, so you
COVID also
agree.
delayed some projects from coming online. So it really was the recovery, the COVID and then the recovery that has driven this.
So you're in agreement with His Excellency Asia,
Absolutely.
the primary driver for the current high global prices. What about the outlook for Henry Hub prices across this winter?
Well, I mean, the same of what we've been talking about applies to Henry Hub. There are a lot, the futures curve says they're going to remain over $4 this winter. And I believe that because the average rate of injections has been really below par, because inventories aren't getting replenished because natural gas demand has been really strong this summer with the very high temperatures and air conditioning load we've had, on top of a cold winter where we already got behind the 8 ball in terms of inventory levels. I think we've maxed out gas substitution back to coal. And then, of course, you had the strong economic recovery from COVID in the first half, or at least the second quarter specifically, and that increased power and industrial gas demand. But another factor is the call on gas from Asia, which is pulling gas from the US as well as LNG from Europe over to Asia. And on the supply side, we've seen producer capital discipline, and that's limited the recovery of gas production. And the Marcellus Basin, which is a third of US gas production, has maxed out on its gas pipeline takeaway capacity, and it's been impossible to permit additional capacity there. So all of those factors suggest that we are in an elevated period of high gas prices in the US, at least through the winter.
Your Excellency, in the next 5 years, many analysts see or forecast a shortage of investments in fossil fuel exploration and expansion because of climate change policies. This may lead to a tight oil market as current fields deplete, which are not being replaced. So how is that dilemma being resolved?
I think, the problem today, and how to tackle with the issue of the climate change. With my experience, because I was elected, 2011 to be the chairman of the COP18. And the time, there were a mandatory agreement from the first Q2 agreement, the COP1 or COP2 or 3, to cut 20% of the emission by 2020. It was a mandatory. So we are discussing at that time, in the how to reach that. Unfortunately, it was, United States is not part of the agreement. Japan walked out. Canada walked out because what? The sand oil. They cannot, committed for reduce, to cut emission dramatically. And then India is not part of it. China is not part of it. So the big players are not part of it. So even though, we seeing a lot of studies, and from IEA, from IPCC, from many, agents, they give you, projection, but it will not work. It's not realistic. Believe me, I was discussing at that time with IEA and other, they're now the recent, report. They're saying, that by 2050, the whole cars will be or public transportation electrical, and will be the demand of oil will be very dramatically, even some of them they talking that 2050 is the end of era of oil.
That's the ambition anyway.
This is never, it will, I can, I for sure, that not me and you, we will be alive by 2050. And even all the analysts who did this report, they will not be alive. So they can, and I can sit in my office, give you a very beautiful analyst, very beautiful forecast. But I discussed with them recently, we have debate with them through our foundation, through the Zoom, and so between IA and our foundation, to talk about their new report. So even I asked this guy, I said, are you sure that you will reach by 2050? He said, this is only a forecast. I cannot, predict it 100% that we will reach it. Yeah. And I respect, when I was a minister before, and I was chair of OPEC several times, in the high side of oil and the low side of the oil, always, when see the forecast, I remember, the time when, one of the international bank, I think, let me remember, he predict when the price it was over 100, that by 2020 will reach $200. And I say, it's impossible. I said, this is only I believe it's a speculation. The speculators, they're playing in the market very, very strong rules. So I believe, that, we cannot just to predict what we know. Okay, we have a lot of parameters that we can tackle it, and we can assuring that this is very possible. You just put, some reports say by 2050 it will be so and so and so. Okay, maybe Europe they will, will be the first, or even United States or other industrial country that in the electrical car they will be in, growing fast. But the other world, what do you think, Africa, Middle East, Latin America, Asia, they are the majority of the population of the whole world. They will never do it. They have, even many countries, they have a big shortage of electrical. They don't even have electrical in their houses. You want them to have electrical in their cars? This is, the way that we have to study it very, very carefully. We have to, even though what Europe can do or America, the other cannot do. You cannot just put a report only to explain the situation in Europe and America.
Okay, well, considering, I mean, you're skeptical, I know, Your Excellency, about some of the forecasts, but considering that IEA, OPEC, and some other industry analysts are now predicting that fossil fuel demand will only peak by 2040, 2045, is there a danger of stranded assets, do you think? Is that the real offcut?
No, you see, for us, okay, I believe oil will continue, to play very strong rules for the coming, years. Qatar is a small oil producer, so we are not considering oil. It's just, not in the whole portfolio. It's gas. So gas for us is the most challenge for us. Qatar today, as you say, we are producing 77 million tons. We are considering today are the biggest LNG producers. Now we have a big project to increase our production from 77 million tons to 126 million tons. And already the construction start. We believe that by 2004-05 they will start, the beginning of the increase of the production. Also, that we are, that we built a big one of the biggest LNG terminal in USA, in Golden Pass. And when we finish this project, Qatar Petroleum, with our partner ExxonMobil, just we spent more than $1.4 billion. Suddenly, the shale gas go up, the production go up, the price of LNG go down, the gas price in USA, go down from $15 for MTB to $3, even cannot cover our transportation. So I remember, I sat with Rex Tillerson, my good friend Rex Tillerson, to discuss what we should do with this beautiful, I visited this terminal several times, what we should do with this beautiful terminal. We cannot just turn it to, for students to visit, to see a symbol of terminal, but never work. So we develop, an idea. How about to convert it from export LNG to import LNG to export LNG. And our philosophy is that it can be work and it's very good economical that, we challenge with the low price of the Henry Hub as a feed gas. And at the same time, what our plan, when we start to produce LNG from Golden Pass, and already I think they start, the construction. This is recently when I discussed, with ExxonMobil from time to time. And then what we will do, we release our export to Europe from Qatar. We replace it with the production or coming from Golden Pass, and the LNG who we used to be sent it, when we start this project to Europe, we can release it and sell it in Asia and Middle East and other parts of the world.
Can I just step in there, Your Excellency, just for a second, because I want to ask Dominic, when Golden Pass LNG export is on stream in 2024, I think, Qatar will join the US as a key LNG exporter from North America. So how will the project build on the current relationship with ExxonMobil and the US, of course?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. First, just let me say how grateful I am to be part of this panel with the US-Qatar Business Council and to be here with His Excellency Al-Attiyah. I think His Excellency described the concept very well. We're very proud of this investment that we're making with the state of Qatar and Qatar Petroleum at Golden Pass. As His Excellency described, it's built on decades of a strategic partnership with Qatar to help build a global LNG business to meet the world's demands. And as he described, this provides us multiple supply points, which helps to optimize, the transportation of LNG around the world. As His Excellency described, it's a very large investment. It will produce 16 MTA. It's a $10 billion investment, and construction has started. In fact, we're about a third way through the construction. It's on schedule to start up in 2024. And obviously it benefits our relationship with Qatar. It benefits the state of Qatar, and also I think it's worth mentioning, since we're talking about a US-Qatar Business Council, a huge boom to the economy of South Texas and West Louisiana. With currently there's over 4,000 people on the site, so it's a great project. I think the timing is going to be good in the market, and we're looking forward to start up in 2024.
Thank you, Dominic. Your Excellency, I want to come back to you if I can. The IEA has recently published its long-awaited roadmap for the net zero world, which you talked about, by 2050. Now, that report sets out some very ambitious goals that include no sales of new internal combustion petrol cars, which is great because I just bought my new one, by 2035, and zero emissions from the global electricity sector by 2040. How achievable, I know you talked about it briefly, but how achievable do you think these net zero targets really are?
It will never be achievable. We discuss it with IEA. We believe that this is, is not a pragmatic. What we can see from, you don't talk about Europe. They are not the only continent in the world. And even the emission, you cannot just say zero emission when there are a lot of countries still will produce a lot of emissions. The sky is covered the whole continent, not only just to Europe is not isolated, or even USA or the industrial countries. A lot of countries who produce coal and even cheap quality, as India, China, and other parts of the world, and they are still heavily independent in produced power from, their coal mines. I remember, when I discussed, in the COP18 with the Indian minister and in the Chinese minister and the other delegation, I say, but you have to tackle, the issues of the pollution. India is facing a lot of, pollution, and China too. And I told the minister, this will be very, very challenging for you. He said, Minister, don't give me gun and ask me to shoot my leg. We have a lot of coal mines. We have millions of people work there. India is overpopulation. If we close our own mines and our production, what we should do? We have over 100 million work direct or indirect in the coal business. And this is very impossible.
So that brings once again the focus back to gas, doesn't it?
Yeah, okay, focus to the gas, but you can't see, is it, when I give you the example, gas, yes, when I went to India the first time in the middle of 90s, just to convince them to buy gas. In that time, there are a lot of challenges in India, because when my first visit, I was shocked when they discussed with me and they say, okay, give us, cheap gas, cheap oil can beat the coal in India. And I said, this is impossible, but you have to take, you challenge, a lot of, pollution. Even I remember when I landed in New Delhi, even you cannot smell. even when I went to China, it was Peking, it was very, very horrible. Yes. When I went to Korea, they complained that they import from China a lot of acid rain. So you can see it's a yellow cloud there. So the way that, even with the Canada, when I was discussing why you are not part of it, you used to be very supportive. They told me, frankly, they said, Minister, we have a big reserve of sand oil, and sand oil produces a lot of CO2. And Alberta, state of Alberta, is a very important state. And it's the most of the sand oil there. So politicians sometimes, I always say it in my experience, don't trust two, forecaster and politician.
Okay. Marianne, are you as skeptical as His Excellency? How achievable do you think these net zero targets are?
Well, I don't think they're achievable because it would require a level of investment in energy that is just not likely to occur. You would have to triple the investment in clean energy and energy infrastructure by 2030. Energy intensity would have to fall at 2.5 times the rate that we've seen historically. And almost 50% of the emissions reductions in that IEA report are said to come from technologies that aren't yet commercially available. So how doable is this? And I agree with His Excellency that developing countries are going to find it very difficult to fund these investments. And they're going to be more focused on jobs, increasing access to electricity, and clean cooking fuels than they are going to be about CO2 emissions. And even developed countries will find it difficult to permit and build the infrastructure that's needed. Try building transmission lines in the US. Also, if you have to change behavior of people in the US, making them buy an electric vehicle or raising and lowering house temperatures, there's going to be a reaction against it. It concerns me that some consuming country governments are averse to fossil fuels being any part of the net zero solution. And I think it would be more achievable if you include these in the solution. And particularly the role of gas as a solution in the next decade, as I think is undervalued. Just reducing methane leakage in the gas value chain, not only will it make gas more acceptable to governments, but it quickly reduces the concentration of a potent greenhouse gas. And then coal and oil to gas fuel switching in the power sector could reduce CO2 emissions quickly as well. And gas-fired power can enhance reliability. I've recently read that California is in emergency adding some natural gas fired power plants because they can't have enough power. This is after they've spent the last 5 years reducing their natural gas fired power plants. So, I mean, gas is a great solution. It can be used in hard to abate sectors such as heavy duty freight trucks and ships. Steam reforming gas with CCS, or blue hydrogen could be the lowest and fastest way to obtain clean hydrogen for hard to abate industrial sectors, while you have R&D reducing the cost of green hydrogen. And also, people are averse to building natural gas pipeline infrastructure in Europe, but you can build it with the intent of eventually converting it to hydrogen if and when the time comes to do so. I also am skeptical about the ramp up in electrification for passenger vehicles, even though we are going to see some. To get to 60% of new car sales by 2030, which is in the IEA's case, versus 5% today. I mean, battery technology is not going to be cost competitive probably with conventional engines to the mid-20s. You have to build a large number of charging stations for people, but they're not going to be economic for the private sector to build because people will mostly charge at home. Battery metal costs are going to go up substantially, and that's going to make it hard to compete. And again, developing countries like India may not have sufficient reliable enough power to actually power these vehicles. So here's my worry. Instead of mandating electrification or any other policy, I wonder whether it would be better policy for governments to mandate greenhouse gas performance standards and let the countries, the investors, and the consumers figure out how to get there.
Yeah, there is a degree of cynicism about electric vehicles.
Yes.
Based on the fact some people say it's a good way to sell new cars in a difficult climate. But I'm going to put the same question to Dominic in a moment. But before I go to Dominic, can I ask you, Marianne, you've laid out some solutions about trying to achieve net zero. Which are the most far-fetched in your view, do you think?
Well, I think the ramp up in electrification in that short a time frame, I think is not really conceivable.
It's not achievable.
If you look at BP's net zero case versus the IEA's in 2030, you see that BP is much higher in oil demand. And I think it's because they don't perceive the electric vehicle penetration can happen as quickly. I think fossil fuels should be part of the solution, and you can get there with lower cost and faster. So that's what's missing for me from what's laid out by these plans.
Okay, let's get an industry perspective from Dominic. How achievable do you think net zero targets are, Dominic?
Very challenging. I echo His Excellency and Marianne's comments. And even if you look at the report, the EIA report recognizes that this is a scenario, and to achieve this target, here's what has to be done. But look, I think our industry has two big responsibilities. And the first responsibility is reliable and cost-effective energy, full stop, to provide the energy to all the people that His Excellency described in developing economies. The second responsibility is to cooperate with all the key stakeholders to manage the risk of climate change and other environmental risks. There are other risks in addition to climate change. And I'm afraid that without the right government policies and coordination, these two priorities are going to be in forever conflict, and we won't achieve anywhere near these targets. So as I see it, the only way to satisfy these two priorities is to get three things right. Number one, and Marianne discussed this a little bit, we have to embrace that meeting this challenge requires multiple solutions. Don't try and pick winners and losers. Define net carbon emissions as the problem, not any particular energy source. We need renewables, batteries, nuclear, hydro, bio, hydrogen, and yes, we need oil and gas accompanied by carbon capture and storage. Secondly, we need technology to further unlock potential. The report got this right when it concluded that government research and development spending has got to accelerate dramatically, needs to be prioritized. Especially in areas like electrification, hydrogen, bioenergy, and carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So we got to have the technology. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, is we have to unleash the power of entrepreneurship in markets. It's the only way. The pace of change will be maximized when the right economic incentives are in place. Government should enact policies that reward carbon emission reduction without picking winners and losers. One example is some sort of a carbon pricing. There's multiple options. And then let the entrepreneurs compete for these economic rewards, and then we'll be amazed. We'll be amazed how fast the change happens. But you have to have these three things in place: multiple solutions, technology, and the right market-driven government policies.
Well, let's hope they get all those in order. I want to move on to gas to hydrogen. And Your Excellency, hydrogen as a zero emission fuel is a good solution to reducing the emissions of the energy industry. And it's, of course, gaining a lot of momentum, a lot of chatter. Natural gas, as you know, is currently the primary source of hydrogen production. Here in London, the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been speaking recently about hydrogen, which he says he likes and also sees it as the answer, if not the panacea, to many, many problems. In your opinion, though, what needs to be done for hydrogen to make a significant contribution to clean energy transition?
Okay. First, let me to comments also about what the future of LNG. I'm a big believer, in technology. And since even when I was a minister and I was chairman of Qatar Petroleum National Oil Company, and we always, to tackle, the issues about, technology. Technology, how the carbon captures, CO2 capture, how, the zero flare, how we can, also to, we concentrate in all to capture all this is emission, and gas is a zero emission. So gas is one of the best solution for the whole world. First, you can build it very, very quick. You can build a big power station in LNG zero emission in just 2 years, 1.5 years. Gas also can give you a very flexibility for transportation, especially LNG. You can divert tanker there and there, and is a very safety. I am not big believer in pipelines. Go through many countries. This is also, you remember Ukraine and Russia and Germany, when the German one day in the middle of the winter they wake up very freezed when Russia cut the. So always I believe, when people that time ask me, what do you think, Mr. Al-Attiyah, for a pipeline? I said, oh, I have the biggest floating pipeline in the world. So the day that, because we are operating the biggest ship of gas, Qatar, the Qatar Gas Transportation Company, today the biggest company transportation for gas in the world. So I believe that, this is why give Qatar, the image, to increase our production very dramatically. Also, in the Gulf countries itself, they have a big shortage of gas. So we supply to United Arab Emirates. Now we already, signed a supply agreement with Kuwait, now 4 million tons. And I believe it will be increased. The demand will be very dramatically. Also, Saudi Arabia, they have a very, very big shortage of gas. They burn about almost 3 million barrels of oil in power sectors. So I believe that all this in consideration, as Dominique say and Marianne say, that technology will help the gas, more and more to become the first choice for the whole world. Is the most cleanest, and fuel for power, industrials, public transportation. Many fields will benefit from the LNG to come. And as you say, the hydrogen gas is one of the big resource of hydrogen. So gas, in the end of the day, what we see and forecast, it will be the the whole world need mixed energy. I don't, I even support, mixed energy as solar, what you call it, thermal, what you call it, hydro, what you call, all this, resources of the world, they need it. So
can this supply of gas you're talking about, do you think, kickstart what we would call, I suppose, a hydrogen economy?
Yeah, I mean, what in the end of the day, hydrogen coming from the gas or from other source. But what I want saying and tackle that gas by itself as a natural gas will be very, will be one of the best choice. So even people, when they go to hydrogen, not the whole world will independent in hydrogen. Nowhere, you cannot just say to dominate one energy the whole world. Yes, it will help. Now we are looking to zero emission, and especially in the industrial, especially in power, especially in public and in shipping. So we are always trying, even we're trying now in our LNG fleet, to use, gas in the, substituting, diesel or fuel. So this is the way that you can say zero emission through the, to solve even, okay, from all our transport, ships, gas ships in the whole world, coming to Europe or so, or sometimes they they will tell you Europe standard about, the diesel. Also, we are a big producer today in GTL, and we are the biggest country in the world who produce GTL. GTL, the gas.
Sorry, Your Excellency, I just wanted to get sort of the industry perspective on hydrogen and the possibilities of a hydrogen economy, because that's the current chat everywhere, isn't it, hydrogen?
Yeah, the potential is there, Stephen. And I'll just build on one of the comments that His Excellency mentioned. Methane or natural gas, LNG, it actually is the first step to a hydrogen economy. Natural gas is 1 part carbon, 4 parts hydrogen. So that's what makes it so attractive relative to other hydrocarbons. It's not too big of a leap to chop off the carbon and sequester the carbon, and you're left with hydrogen. You can also make ammonia out of methane or LNG. The potential is there, and the good news about hydrogen is that the technology is already mature. Every refinery and chemical plant in the world is producing hydrogen. We produce a lot of ammonia to for fertilizers. So the technology is there, and it's a very good option for applications that are very hard to decarbonize, like His Excellency mentioned, shipping or heavy manufacturing, etc. So there are limited technical barriers.
Is ExxonMobil looking at hydrogen production? And if so, what uses outside what we would call the traditional refining ones, I suppose?
Yes, the answer is yes. In fact, we started a company earlier this year called ExxonMobil Carbon Solutions. And in addition to carbon capture and storage, they're looking at hydrogen and biofuels. The challenge today with hydrogen is not the technology. It is that it's simply more expensive compared to unabated natural gas. Green hydrogen, which comes from methane, from renewables and water, it's 5 times more expensive than natural gas.
Oh, good heavens!
Even blue hydrogen, which comes from methane or LNG, and you chop off the carbon and sequester it, it's still twice as expensive as natural gas. So getting back to the policy discussion, there has to be an incentive. There has to be policy enacted that makes it attractive for the producers to invest in the production of hydrogen to create that economy. And until that policy is in place, it's going to be very difficult to really grow the hydrogen economy. It gets back to having the right policies in place.
Your Excellency, do you think governments around the world are sufficiently aware of the potential for hydrogen economies?
As you know, Dominique, explained very, very good about the cost. Cost is a very important, in all the challenge, that now what we see, how are you going to buy a very expensive fuel or, to operate your power and others where, they are very, very similar, zero emission and more cheaper. So now, governments cannot, go to heavy subsidizing, hydrogen just to they say that we can't solve the problems of the emission. Governments will never solve emissions, and they cannot. Governments always, they play, the game through the public. They always, politicians come saying we will support, how reduce the emission, and at the same time, when it comes to the reality, they will never, I will just give you example how the politicians play the games. When I was chairman of COP 18, I sit with what they call it underdeveloped countries, and there are many of them, from Africa, Asia, the small island in the Caribbean and others, or the Pacific. So I sit with them. Then they say, Your Excellency, in Copenhagen Cup, the old president there, Barack Obama and other presidents, and Prime Minister of Britain and German, and all of them, they went to COP in Copenhagen, and they promised to create a fund by $100 billion to support underdeveloped countries and small islands. Now they say for 4 years, until then they have Cancun, and then South Africa, and then come to Qatar, and they say, we would like to ask what happened with this fund. And I said, who promised to you? They said, most Europe and President of the United States and so on. And every time we call them, they say, okay, we are waiting and so on. So then next day I met with the European community, the whole ministers, 22 ministers. And I said, listen, the small countries and the underdeveloped countries on the island, because small island, they are very concerned that because of the climate change, one day they will disappear because of the water will raise and cover them. So, and I said, they are still waiting for your promising to create this fund.
That's a very good point. Because
and then, what the answer? It was shocked me. Europe now, they are entering recessions, and we cannot commit it, and the economy is and you see, the problem, when you committed, to create this green, fund or fund for this underdeveloped countries, and you give them just, dream, they love it, and they wait for it, and never come. So I told them, I came back to them and I said, listen, your dream is converted to a disaster. So stop dreaming.
Well, unfortunately, they're still waiting for the money, aren't they? And I wonder if at COP26.
If you the politicians sometimes, they go to mandatory, they will talk to you about hydrogen, they talk to you about green, energy, they will talk to you with a lot of theoretical. And one of the European ministers shocked me. He said, we have, a lot of studies, and we have our companies, they develop, a technology that it will reduce. So I told him, listen, Your Excellency, there are 1 billion people. They never see a light. They have no power at all. They cut the wood, they destroyed, the rainforest, and you want me to talk to, to say to them, buy a very high technology, expensive from European companies?
I know, it's out of touch. But Your Excellency, I think that this will come up again at COP26 in Glasgow about whether or not the Green Fund, as it's called, will be sufficiently funded by the big nations. And so far, I'm told that they're falling short of money. But I want to change, because we're moving sort of towards the final of this webinar, because I want you to answer a question about OPEC. And I wonder, OPEC held a much smaller market share recently than in previous decades. Everyone looked to it to stabilize the market last year, which you know. So how significant do you think OPEC's role will be in the future?
As you know, if you go back to the 70s and the 80s, OPEC share of the market used to be over 70%. Now, I believe that the share of OPEC is less than 30%. So today, OPEC is a minority producers. So, but at the end of the day, the oil price in the market, driven by the market, it will affect all oil producers, either OPEC or non-OPEC. Now we see recently when the oil price was go very sharply, all what they call it, then they developed this gathering, what they call it OPEC plus, including Russia and others, So they met because why they met? Because they are trying to defend their own industry, their own resource, their own butter and bread. So they agreed for big cut, and they agreed that they will implement it, and they agreed that this is the only solution to gather together and to work together. So at the time, I remember when OPEC, during my time, when OPEC cut production, I received when I was a chairman, I received a call from Secretary of Energy in USA and some other Europe. This is a disaster. Don't know why you do it, and so and so. Now, America has closed their eyes because they have a big shale oil, so they want to support it. So it's a big now start, to be America a change from net exporter to exporter, oil and gas. So they are affected, so dramatically to create a big business, shale oil and shale gas. So the time, when you hear, this politician, I tell you, interest first, and then others back. Don't, this is why I told you, don't trust politicians. They will talk to you, and they will
sound like me.
When they have their own interest, they will close their eyes. So now, OPEC Plus, they're trying, to recover, and also, God thanks that China and India went to the market, especially China. So the demand started, to be big. So they buy more oil resources. So this is the price driven by the demand. No way to have driven without demand and supply. So the driven now, we can see the oil price reach 70, 72 in Brent, almost very closely for the, American oil. So the way that, they say, when you can see that, this is why in the last Baker Hughes report, there are a lot of, rigs coming to the, they start, to digging, for shale oil and gas. This is the way that the price of oil is now 70, 72 is a very comfortable for producers. So the way that, they believe that this will give them time to breathe and to also to cover their heavy subsidizing or their budget, the deficit in the budget. So the way that the oil will continue now, that OPEC Plus will continue to work together, OPEC and the Plus. So OPEC cannot be swinger producers no more.
I want to bring in Mohammed on this one. Mohammed, with both the US and Qatar not being part of OPEC, both being two of the world's largest.
We used to be, but we walk from OPEC.
Well, I remember it used to be largest oil and gas producers in the world. How do you, Mohammed, foresee Qatar and the US's role in global energy markets and, of course, sustainability initiatives going forward?
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. Definitely. I mean, both the US and Qatar, they are leaders in the oil and gas sector internationally. Both countries have very also good emphasis on the sustainability on those two sides. The LNGs, specifically with Qatar as a major LNG producer, and the US becoming there and getting there with partnerships as well with countries like Qatar, like everyone here mentioned today. These LNG contracts are long-term supply contracts, as everyone know here. This minimizes the price fluctuation, provides stable energy prices. The LNG producing countries will yield more and more greater influence in the global energy, and that will change. That will create a shift. Yes, not being part of OPEC or OPEC Plus now, and Qatar, withdrawing from OPEC. but the LNG is pushing more as becoming important. As everyone on this panel mentioned today, it is becoming one of the most important energy resources that's also focused for sustainability. So the US and Qatar as well, if you look at both of them, they're both investing heavily in the sustainability, carbon capture, storage facilities, many other projects. Qatar Petroleum is doing this. Many companies in the United States, Dominic just mentioned ExxonMobil is investing in establishing companies in that. So we're looking at a big shift between LNG producers becoming more involved in heavy players in the energy market. And at the same time, these countries are doing more for the sustainability and energy reduction of emissions. The US and Qatar both actually, we know a couple months ago, they joined the Net Zero Producers Forum, which actually hopefully looking forward to see more of that, reducing emissions and new strategies in doing this. So with these commitments, with these two countries playing major roles in these two aspects, I see a major role for both of them actually in the global energy market. And even one quick part to add to a lot of the things that were mentioned in the discussion today, also the investments, and I know Dominic mentioned this and everyone, His Excellency and Marianne, the investment in the newer technologies. These are investments that Qatar is doing through their investment arms, or even the United States. These technologies, not just in the energy side, but also the smart technologies, reduction of utilization of energy. You notice the sensor in my office kept going on and off and lights, but the smart technologies will reduce the energy use, not just in electric cars, but in homes, smart logistic ports, more and more of that. Hopefully will reduce that emission, will reduce the carbon footprint that we do beyond just the energy itself.
Believe it or not, the Queen was an early adapter of this. She goes around Buckingham Palace putting off the lights one by one every time she leaves a room, but that's an old story. But we've had lots of questions come in from the audience, but one of the most important is to follow on from your point, Mohammed. And Marianne, if you can tell us how, briefly, please, the international oil and gas industry is adapting to the energy transition. It's such an important transition.
Well, I mean, the first thing they're doing is reducing their own emissions, trying to reduce methane leakage and gas flaring. Another way of reacting is reducing capital investment and returning more money to shareholders through either dividends or share buybacks and reducing debt, which is why I worry about insufficient investment going forward. They're investing in carbon capture projects, as ExxonMobil already mentioned. They're buying carbon credits to make their product cleaner, but I don't think that's a long-term strategy because as everyone wants to buy them, the price of them is going to go way up. European majors are probably investing in renewable power sources. Companies are switching from oil to natural gas investments, and you see some, particularly the European companies, selling oil assets in the US. Some companies are actually committing to reduce oil production. Again, that's why I worry about the investment sufficiency. And I think lots of companies are switching to shorter cycle projects to reduce risk. That is not a great thing for deep water and LNG, but they're focused more on US type 18 months returns, which reduces price risk. So that's how I see what different companies are doing.
Lastly, Dominic, you mentioned during our discussion that ExxonMobil has a new company called ExxonMobil Low Carbon Solutions. Just briefly outline the focus of the company, and can you share with us any specific near-term plans? That's another question from the audience. So
yeah,
up to you.
Yeah, sure, Stephen. Yeah, so the company is called ExxonMobil Low Carbon Solutions, and as I mentioned before, the primary focus initially is carbon capture and storage, but we're also looking at biofuels and hydrogen. I'll share a couple examples. We have a portfolio of 20 carbon capture and storage projects ranging from the US Gulf Coast, Wyoming, Netherlands, Belgium, Scotland, Singapore, and even right here in Qatar with our partners Qatar Petroleum and Qatar Gas, we're building additional carbon capture and storage capacity. The biggest project is one that we're pursuing in the US Gulf Coast and the Houston Ship Channel to basically create a corridor for the collection and transportation, and then injection into storage reservoirs from the industrial section that goes across the Houston Ship Channel. That could be $100 billion investment. Obviously, we need government policy, we need partners, but that's a big one.
Right.
And then additionally, I mentioned technology, so we're collaborating with partners across industry and academia to pursue technology around low carbon. And then finally, in the space of, and I mentioned biofuels, we just announced the development of Canada's largest renewable diesel production. It's going to be integrated with our Imperial Oil refinery in Strathcona. And by 2025, we'll be producing 40,000 barrels a day of renewable diesel fuel from sources like canola and soybean. So great progress in this space, and much more to come.
And that's such an optimistic and a positive note, Dominic. Thank you so much. And it brings us to the end of this vitally interesting webinar. The subject of how the relationship between the USA and Qatar is a fascinating one, and like all good relationships, is developing all the time, truly where energy meets politics. I want to thank all our participants, but especially to you, Your Excellency. It's been great to talk to you today again, and of course to Marianne, Dominic and Mohammed, but also to all the background staff who, thanks to them, who make this webinar possible. But I want to pass for the final word to Mohammed. Thank you very much, Mohammed.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Firstly, I'd like to thank His Excellency for sharing his valuable insight and knowledge. Again, always pleasure to have you. Thanks our panelists, Dominic, Janetti, and Marianne for sharing their expert commentary as well, and expertise from the industry. Stephen, for moderating. This is a fantastic event, and we appreciate that time. We always work at the USQBC to continue to, advocate, educate, and provide more information when it comes to different industries. Energy is one of the most important one of them. We see more of this happening, and as a US-based organization working closely with Qatar as well, two energy important countries, we look forward for more of this. I appreciate your time, appreciate the audience time, and we look forward for our next events and engagements.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Excellency.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.